Hi, I'm Dave Annal, professional genealogist with more than 40 years' experience as a researcher. This is a very short introduction to using and understanding the records of the Tithe Commission. The Commission produced a vast amount of paperwork, but I want to focus on just two types of documents. The apportionments, which include the data, the names of the owners and occupiers, a description, often the name of the property itself, an indication of what the property was used for, and details of its area in the wonderful Old English measurements of acres, rods and perches, and plot references which link to the maps. And of course, I want to look at the maps themselves. As a family historian, I'm used to coming at these records from the perspective of the people rather than the places. But while my initial interest may be in the occupants, I also want to find out as much as I can about the houses they lived in and how those houses, along with their occupants, fitted into the wider communities in which they lived. Most of the work of the Tithe Commission was carried out in the late 1830s and early 1840s, so the records can be used to good effect in conjunction with the 1841 census returns. One of the big drawbacks of the 1841 census, and there are many, is the often vague nature of the information recorded about individual addresses. You'll see here that the relevant column is headed simply place, leaving it up to the census officials to decide for themselves how precise to be. Of course, in the days before the advent of the penny post in January 1840, there was little need for precise addresses, particularly in rural areas where everyone knew everyone else and knew exactly where they lived. So it's not surprising that we often find entries in the 1841 census like this, where every individual property on the page is simply listed by the name of the village or hamlet, in this case, Ayot Green, with the name of the parish, Ayot St. Peter, over here at the top of the right-hand page. The main aim of this brief presentation is to demonstrate how, by using tithe records along with other contemporary maps, photographs and postcards, we can take an entry in the 1841 census with a vague address like this and end up by viewing the house itself as it is today on Google Maps. This is, of course, assuming that the property is still there. So let's have a look at how this might work in practice. We're going to start with the entry for the Harwood family. This is them here. You can see William, age 30, Harriet, age 25, along with their two children. And they're living at an unspecified address in Ayot Green, which is in the parish of Ayot St. Peter, near Welwyn in Hertfordshire. Tithe records are held by the National Archives, but we can access them on a website called the Genealogist. And this is the page where we can search for individuals. I've already entered all the details. I'm looking for William Harwood. I've selected the county of Hertfordshire and the parish of Ayot St. Peter. If we run that search, we can see that it brings up two results. If we click on the first one to view the apportionment, we can see him listed here near the top of the page, William Harwood Senior, the plot number 109, occupying a cottage and garden area of 12 perches. However, this probably isn't our man, who you remember was only about 30 in 1841, and therefore unlikely to be described as senior. So we'll look at the other entry, which actually turns out to be further down the same page. There he is, William Harwood Jr., surely a stronger candidate to be our William. Again, he's an occupier of a cottage and garden, and the apportionment tells us that the area of this property was 7 perches. But how can we tell whether this is our man from the census or not? Well, the first thing to do is to look at the names of the occupiers of the neighbouring properties. Here, the property numbers are all bunched together, and we can instantly see that Joseph Clark and Charles Stiles are the occupiers of properties 145 and 147 respectively. And if we have a look back at the census page, we can see our William Harwood up here, and just a few doors down the page, we can see Charles Stiles and Joseph Clark. So we can now proceed confidently with the assumption that our William is the man who was occupying plot number 146, and we can look at the property on the map. So it's the second William Harwood that we're interested in. We'll click on the map here, and we can see straight away it's very promising because it's dropped us right on Ayot Green, further evidence that we do have the right person. Unfortunately, this particular map is not the best in terms of quality, but we can see enough to work out that William was the occupant of this left hand of two properties. Let's just get rid of the label there. It's the left hand of these two semi-detached properties. Having located our property, then we can go on to look at some other sources. I've got here a late 19th century Ordnance Survey map, 25-inch, from the wonderful National Library of Scotland website. And we can see right down the bottom of the map here, bottom left corner, we can see Ayotte Green. And there we can see much clearer the two properties next to each other, with the building just to the north set back from the green a little bit. Now that we know precisely where our property was, we can begin to explore other sources. And the perfect companion for historical mapping is historical photography. And we're fortunate in this case to have access to a fantastic resource put together by a local history group focusing on the parish of Ayotte St Peter. Unfortunately, I had a few problems getting onto the site when I was recording this, but I have a few sample photos that I downloaded some time ago. Here we can see our cottage on the left with its semi-detached partner, and the other apparently much older pair of cottages to the right, set back from the green, and then the long row of cottages running down the hill. This image dates from around 1905. There are several other views of the green, some of which we get a glimpse of our cottage, but I want to show you this later shot here, which shows that the two old cottages to the north of ours have been pulled down and replaced by a mock Tudor structure, apparently known as Haven House. Our cottage is still there on the left. All that remains now, assuming that you can't head off in a car yourself, is to head over to Google Maps and see what you can find there. I've navigated my way to Ayotte Green, and I'm going to just drive along this road, and there in front of us are the pair of cottages with the mock Tudor building to the right. So this building on the left here is the building in which William Harwood and family were living at the time of the 1841 census. Of course, this process isn't always going to work. All too often, the buildings that our Victorian ancestors lived in have been pulled down, particularly those in inner cities. But I've had a huge amount of success over the years with this process, and when it does work, the ability to go from vague addresses on the 1841 census to viewing actual buildings in the flesh, as it were, can provide a wonderful connection with our ancestors and their distant lives.